Hi, this is Dr. Eddie Morgan over at Clovis East High School, ready to help you with your homework tonight. Tonight we'll be looking at the Math 1 homework, worksheet 8.2. Remember, every problem on the homework help mirrors the problems on your homework. So if you're having a problem with a particular problem, go to that and fast forward to that number and we should be able to help you out. So let's get started. First six problems give us points on a graph and ask us to reflect them either over the x-axis and the y-axis. So let's get started. First it says to find point A and reflect over the y-axis. So the first thing I want to do is draw the y-axis. And there's A, you see right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line from A directly to the y-axis. And notice it goes over 2 units. So then on the other side, we go over 2 units, and that's the reflection, exactly the same number. Notice that it was 2 units this way, and so it's 2 units back that way to get to the point D. And so our reflection is D, or the point A prime, minus 2, positive 2. The next one asks us to take B, which as you know is up there above A, and reflect it over the x-axis. So let's put the x-axis in first. Notice it's the horizontal. Once again, we'll go from B perpendicular to the line, and notice it goes down 1, 2, 3, 4. And so then I'm going to go 4 down on the other side because that's the reflection. And there's our point now, B prime, which you see is minus 4, 4. You notice when we went over the y-axis on point A, it stayed the same. The y stayed the same, but the x moved. When we went over the x-axis, the x variable stayed the same, but the y became the opposite. We move to the next one for C, and now C, they want C over the y-axis, so let's print the y-axis again. So notice now I'm going to go directly to there, and notice it's 2 over, just like it was above for A. And so then on the other side I go 2, and we go 2 over this way. And so this is our new point C prime right here. And notice that the variable, the coordinates is negative 2x and then negative 2 down. For D, we're going to reflect over the x-axis. So there's our x-axis again. So D is up here. And so now we're going to go down to the axis. Notice we go down 2. And so then we'll go 2 over the other side. And notice we end up at the same point we just did for a C prime. So in other words, our D prime ends up having the same value, minus 2, minus 2. Our next one, number 5, E is to be reflected over the y-axis. So once again, let's draw our y-axis. So E is on the left side, so we're going to go to the right, and it appears to be 1, 2, 3 units. So then we'll go past there another 3 units because it's a reflection. And this will be our E prime, which is at the point 3 and then down minus 2. Point F, we're reflecting over the x-axis, so let's draw our x-axis, and F is down here in the third quadrant as well. But now we're going to go up to the x-axis, 1, 2, 3 as well. And so we'll go past it 3 units for the reflection, and that will be our F prime there at negative 1, 3. Now, if you look at all these, there's one interesting characteristics about going over the x and y axis. Notice when we go over the xy x-axis, when we go over the x-axis, crossing the x-axis, the x stays the same, but the y becomes negative. So you can almost write that, you can write a rule for it. Reflection over the x-axis actually becomes, the x stays the same, but the y becomes minus. And you can check that out on number 2, 4, and 6. Likewise, when we cross the y-axis, notice that the y stays the same, but it's the x that reverses. So we actually get minus xy. And that's something helpful to remember if you're doing a reflection. Only works across the x-axis and the y-axis. In the diagram there, it shows us 2 triangles that are reflections of each other, and it wants us to name congruent parts. Well, the first thing we need to look at and consider, where is it being reflected at? And if you look, you can see it's being reflected across the x-axis right there. Now let's just see what line corresponds to what. So if I start like with D, D goes down 5 and down to 5 and then to A. So that means D is going to correspond, angle D corresponds to angle A. On the other hand, B is below, and so we go up 1 and then up 1. So B corresponds to angle F. And then finally, E goes down 4 and down 4, so E corresponds to C. Now, it's usually good on these problems to do the angles first, because then we can use a simple trick to find our lines. Notice that the corresponding angles, A always goes to D, B to F, and C to E. So when I want to do something like CE, I can use those segments. I can use this code here to find the ways. For example, number 10, AC. Well, notice here, AC means it's going to go to DE. Okay? And then I have FE. So here's FE. So FE is going to go to BC. And finally, I have BA. So here's B to A. Well, B to A is going to go F to D. So notice that once you find the angles, you can create yourself a little chart like that, and you can find all the sides and make sure you get them correctly that way. Problem 13 asks us to reflect the triangle over the y equals -1 line and then give the coordinates. This is sort of just like doing it over the x-axis in a way, because you notice the y equal -1 line is just below the x-axis. So we'll do the same thing we did before. That little rule about switching them won't quite work, but we do the same thing. So I'm going to take the first point A, and notice A goes down 3. So I'll go down 3 below the y equals -1 line, and there's my point A prime, which happens to be -3, -4. So let's do the same thing for B. Notice B goes down 1, 2, 3. B goes down 6. And so if we go down 6 on the other side there, it's actually going to be off this little graph, but we can still figure out where it is. And there's B prime. And notice that B prime would be at -3 as well, but it's going to be 3 more down to -7. So then we go over to C. C goes down 3. And so we go down 3 on the other side as well. And there's our point for C prime, which turns out to be -1 and -4. Notice the x's stayed the same because we were reflecting down across a line y, kind of like the x-axis. Although although it's a little more of a number going down than if it was actually the x-axis. And then we can draw our triangle. And we're done. And that's the reflection over this line, which is the y equals -1 line. Problem 14 has us reflect a quadrilateral KLMN over the x equal -1 line. And this is a little more challenging because the line actually goes right through our figure. So notice, let's first draw the x equal -1 line. Notice again, it's going to be similar to going through the y-axis, but it's 1 over. But the same process. So let's start with K. So notice K goes over 2. So I go over 2 the other direction to get my K prime right there. And then our next one, and K prime, by the way, is 1 minus 2. And then we look at L. L goes over 1, 2, 3 here. And so it's going to go over 3 the other side. And there is our N prime. Our L prime, excuse me. And our L prime is 2, 0. Now when we look at M, M is on the right side, so it goes back across. Notice it goes 1, and so we go 1 back the other direction. And there is our M prime, which turns out to be -2, 2. And then finally we have N, and N goes 2 to the line, and so 2 back again to the line. And so our point there is our N prime back across that direction. And it has a coordinate of -3, 0. And there is our new rectangle reflected over. Different because the sides on the left here reflected over to the right, and the parts on the right reflected over to the left. Problem 15 asks us to describe what would happen if the image was reflected over the x-axis. Well, let's draw the x-axis first, and let's just start and see where the points are going to go. Notice the upper left point would go down and be reflected down and on the bottom and would end up at the point where the bottom is now, whereas the bottom point would go up and replace that. Notice how they just kind of switched. Likewise, on the other side, the top would go down and be in the bottom, and the bottom would go up in the top. So in essence, the thing would flip around, but you would in essence end up having the image just reflected on itself. So the reflection ends up looking exactly like where you started. Problem 16 is a challenging one because we have the coordinates 1, -1, -2, 4, and t, but we're going to reflect it over the line y equal x. So we're not doing a horizontal or vertical line. Indeed, we're doing a 45-degree line that looks like this. Here's the y equal x line. But the concept is the same. You want to go from any point and you want to go perpendicular to the line. So let's start with R. And notice here's my perpendicular. This is what I mean by perpendicular. I'm going as a perpendicular. I can also kind of do this by mapping out my little triangle here and saying, okay, I went down 3 and over 3, and so then I'm going to do that on the other side. Notice I go down 3 and over 3, and there's my new point, R prime, which ends up being 4 minus 2. All right? So then let's look at our next point. The next point is S, and now S goes back across the line. Notice it goes over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, and so there's our new point there, S prime. And then likewise with T, T is on the left side and it just goes directly across here to T prime. And that's -1, -2. And then our reflected triangle fits in right there. A little more difficult, but you can do it still with the concept that from the point you go perpendicular to the line that you're going to reflect. So I hope that helped you with your homework tonight. Have a great evening.